This big old computer sitting beside me here is an ICL Team Server, model number 56094. Not that putting that into Google actually tells you anything about this. The front door on it has gone a bit limp as well. The other issue is that pushing the power button does very little. So let's take it apart, see if we can figure out what it is, and see if we can get it fixed. This thing is going to be rather difficult to film because of the sheer size of it. But any computer that has wheels on it must mean business. So let's try and figure out what we've got. This door does come on down a bit more, revealing CD drive, tape drive and floppy. Turning to the back, we have the power supply with some rather rusty looking screws. ICL, International Computers Limited from London, and this sticker tells us that we have a maximum current draw of 8 amps. That seems like an awful lot. But I suppose given that this is a server, you might have quite a few hard drives in here, and each one of them will take their own bit. Moving down the case, we have 2 serial ports and 1 parallel, an exhaust fan from the case itself, PS2 keyboard and mouse, VGA card, I assume that's some sort of external SCSI, and then a network card in slot 2. Now, one thing we can tell just from looking at the back of it, the VGA connector here on the display card, that must be an ISA card. And we know that because of the orientation of this port. So let's see about taking it apart. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 screws to take out. Looks like it's one big case, one big cover just wrapping over the top of the case. Let's take those screws out and see what's hiding inside. So the first thing that jumps out here is that there's no power connected. No power connected to more or less anything, certainly not the drives, of which there are 3. Looking at the size of this ribbon cable, as I expected, these are all SCSI. The CD drive, that seems to be SCSI as well, as is the tape drive hiding up in there, although it is currently disconnected from the ribbon. I can see what looks like a separate CPU card hiding in here. We will be stripping this down in a minute to give you a better look. And then in the bottom of the case, well, there's more of a power lead. We can see a bit of the motherboard. There's the network card, and it seems as if 2 of our ISA slots anyway have VLB. A Dallas real-time clock. No doubt we'll need to do something with that. I would expect that that has failed. So I want to just strip this down so we can take everything out and give you a better look at what makes our team server. Now that I have the cables out of the way and some of the metal work, we can more clearly see the cards. CPU card. Now we know this has to be a 486 class machine, given the 2 VLB slots on the motherboard. But unfortunately, the heatsink here is glued to the top of the chip, so we've no real way of knowing what that is. Hopefully when we get this thing powered up, well, it's post screen, that will tell us what we're playing with. Cache RAM, 256k of it, that would be fairly typical for a 486. There's our VGA card based around Cirrus Logic chipset, and I would assume 1 megabyte of RAM in total here, with space to add another 1 meg to bring it up to 2. Just a fairly typical ISA VGA card. There is the SCSI card, and this confirms something that I was suspecting. Given that these are brown in colour, these ISA slots, that reminded me of the E-ISA standard. And this is indeed an E-ISA card. We know that because we have essentially a double row of contacts on the card itself. And if I'm right from memory, the top row is the standard ISA bus, 16-bit. And then the bottom row, you can see thin traces coming down between the standard connectors, coming down to a bottom row, and that is the second 16-bit bus, giving us a total of 32-bit E-ISA. Interesting though that it does have the VLB then, because that in itself is a 32-bit extension of the standard ISA bus. So it certainly seems as if this is a really nice motherboard. ISA, VLB and E-ISA. The network card then, it is just normal 16-bit ISA from ICL, same brand as the machine itself. I would hazard a guess that this is just your standard 10 base T. I need to remove the drive enclosure in order to get the motherboard out. We'll take a closer look at the hard drives in a minute. I can see certainly that the top one is a Seagate. I would assume that one is the same. Seems to be the same sort of footprint. And indeed, yes, the bottom one, I can just about see there, it is a Seagate also. But we'll have a closer look at them in a second. I'll take them out of that caddy just to see what size they are. And I want to test them independently as well to make sure they each spin up. And there's our motherboard. It's really rather compact, isn't it? Especially when you compare it to the size of the machine. But it is sporting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 E-ISA slots with the 2 VLB, and that's the CPU slot. Onboard floppy controller connects here, the ribbon connects here. That's the 2 serial ports and the parallel. Not sure what this is. Could it possibly be onboard IDE? Just the one stick of RAM in here and a 16 written on it. So 16 megabytes. 72 pin SIM of course, so you do only need the one of them installed for a 46 to boot. It is 32-bit. NEC chip over here, and I guess could that be the keyboard controller? Based on an Opti chipset. Similar chip appeared on the CPU card. There is our BIOS with handwritten on it, version 1.15. And the Dallas real-time clock. Is it in a socket? It is indeed. So that will be easy to replace. But why isn't it doing anything? Well, the obvious culprit is the power supply. Let's test this. I've got it turned on here. That's definitely on. But if I flick the power on over at the plug, well, there's nothing happening. Or is there? It's making a noise. Was it the fan turning? Well, I doubt it was that fan turning, because I can hardly turn it there with the probes of this. That is really stiff. But maybe the power supply is outputting something. So it's only managing about 4.5 volts there, slowly trying to creep up. Let's try the 12 volt. And yeah, not a lot happening there. So definitely a bad power supply. Probably the capacitors. It's always the capacitors, isn't it? We'll take it apart in a minute and have a look. But I think we can just use any AT power supply. I was originally a little worried because if we take another look at the motherboard, it has your standard AT power connector here, but also has another power input here. Although if we take a look on the cables coming out of this thing, there is that other power connector, and it's just connected to a standard Molex power lead. But because this is a separate thing, I think we can just use any AT power supply. Just took the lid off the PSU for a quick look, and yeah, there's your problem. That capacitor has definitely leaked, and that one just below it there, it actually looks like it's exploded. In fact, I would say it is the main culprit. There's staining from it down, covering that whole section of the PCB. But considering the power supply does come up and it tries to generate 5 volt and it doesn't really do anything on 12 volt, but you know, it does try to work. I reckon that if we just give this a recap, it probably will come back. It is definitely going to need a new fan though. That one's toast. The bearings in it are completely gone. And I wonder perhaps when this failed, did the rest of the power supply overheat? And those caps down in there, is that when they let go? But since we're testing things, let's try the drives. Starting with the CD drive. Manufactured June 1994. This seems to be a fairly run-of-the-mill CD-ROM drive. Well, powered up. And it opened its drawer. Will it spin a disc? My totally legitimate backup of Duke Nukem 3D. Yep, well, that seems to work. The disc spun up. The hard drives though, these two are indeed matching drives. Seagate Hawks, model number ST31200N. These are both 1.2 gigabyte drives. Will these spin up? No. The light is on, but nobody's home. Sometimes a little persuasion is all they need to get them going again. It did make a bit more noise there, but it's still not spinning. I think the heads have possibly crashed in here. Let's try the other one. Or there's certainly a bit of stiction going on. Again, it almost sounds like it wants to start, but there's nothing happening. Lights on, but the drive is not spinning. Yeah, not working, I'm afraid. 2 for 2. What about the other drive? Another Seagate Hawk, this time model number ST31051N. This drive is just over 1 gig in size, 1.05 gig to be precise. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, that drive has spun up and initialized, so that one at least seems to be good. Bit of a shame about these two. I don't even know if it would be worth trying to open them. I know you can open a small capacity drive, but by the time you get up to 1.2 gigabyte, I think even just opening these would destroy them. Nope, still not going. And this is when someone in the comment section tells me that, you know, a SCSI drive needs to be initialized by the controller before it'll spin. I don't think so though, because this one spun up. Some of these old Seagate hard drives, or well, any manufacturer's hard drives, they have a rubber bump stop in the inside of them. That rubber turns to goo with age, and if that is indeed the case here, the heads may well be jammed against them. And even if we could free it up, you'll have sticky rubber mess in there and it will just get gummed up again. So, assuming that is the case, these two are just beyond it. The old tape drive, ICL branded, Type 8. To be honest with you, I don't think I'd ever have any need for this. I've certainly no tapes for it. I'm not even sure if it'll do anything when plugged in. Nope, no lights, no nothing. But I suspect you probably have to put a tape in to get it to do anything at all. The floppy drive is a fairly standard Mitsumi drive, 1.44 megabytes. I don't have any means of testing this just now. Don't have the adapter cable handy, but I would be surprised if this didn't work. They're usually very reliable, and even if there is something wrong with this, I've probably got about 10 spares anyway, so it's easy to replace. Now, before I go to the trouble of trying to repair the other power supply, I suppose it'd be worth checking if this even works. So I pulled out my spare AT power supply. This thing doesn't have quite the same output as the original one that was in the server, but all we're doing is trying to power up the motherboard, CPU card and a VGA adapter. So let's see if it does anything. Don't necessarily even need to connect up a display, because there is a PC speaker over here. Let's see if that even gives us any tones. Okay, does it do anything? No. Well, yeah, that was a bit of a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? Because I was rushing ahead to test this without actually putting any thought into why did the other power supply blow up. Could there maybe be something wrong with this? There is, we'll get to that in a second, but in my haste to test, I have now blown up this power supply. It's not quite just as crippled as the other one was. It is generating 5 volts okay, but the 12 volt, something there has definitely blown up. It's only getting to 8.2. I don't have too many other spare AT power supplies, so before we risk blowing anything else up, we need to try and fix this board. So I'm sure, as some people were able to guess, the problem here is a short. We actually have a short on the 5 volt rail. But one thing I found interesting about this board is that all the 5 volt rails are not connected. The 5 volt rail going to the EISA slots, that is completely isolated from the 5 volt everywhere else. Looking at the pinout for the AT power connector, these first 3 here are all 5 volt. And you would expect them to be shorted together, but they're not. This third one here, it runs down to the EISA slots. But if we test that between there and ground, which is the 4 pins in the middle, well, it's shorted. I'm not really sure why that seems to have damaged the 12 volt section of both the power supplies. And I also don't really know why it didn't shut down the power supply. I would have thought there would have been some sort of protection within it, but there we are. Maybe it's a consequence of the other 5 volt rails being separate on this motherboard, but I don't really know. Testing all the other pins though, everything else is fine. Let's ground, 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 ground. Yes, that's shorted 5 volt. And the other 2 5 volts, they're fine. So what in here has shorted? Well, see all these little yellow things? They're all tantalum capacitors. They like to go short. And if we check on the underside of the board, I've been able to find 4 of those tantalums that are on that 5 volt rail. And it is reading as a short across them 1.8, 1.7, 1.7 dropping down to 1.6, 1.6 as well. And that one's sort of floating between 1.6 and 1.7. So I wonder, out of all of them, could it be that one there, which is shorted? So I removed that one, the one that was reading the lowest, 1.6 ohms. Is the short now gone? And yes, it is. Is this shorted? Yes, it is. One bad tantalum. And on closer inspection, there is the tiniest of marks just on the top of it, and what looks like a little crack along the top. Very hard to see, but definitely a faulty component. So one new tantalum to fit. Now these have a polarity. You can see the two legs are different lengths, but you can't rely on that to decide which one is a positive, which is a negative. Rather, looking at the tantalum itself, the side here with the line on it and a little positive, the leg directly below that is always the positive leg. That needs to go in there, although that's a bit dirty. Let me clean it up first. Well, let's see if it's going to work. Everything is hooked up again. We've got the VGA card, CPU card, and you'll notice that I've now moved the RAM SIM that was in this bottom socket before. That is bank 4. I've moved it up to bank 1. Not sure if it would make any difference, but always best to put the memory in bank 1 to start with. And this time I've also hooked up that other power supply. Now, buzzing all that out, it does make connectivity. The 5 volt and the 12 volt here does make connectivity through to this. So I'm not actually sure if this is required or not, but I've just hooked up one Molex to one side of that there. Let's see what it does. And yes, that is another power supply again. Hopefully this one doesn't blow up. And it's working. HRA10i VGA BIOS. Copyright International Computers Limited. Oh, beeps. Is that an ICL graphics card? It is. Then it's a Quadtail Corporation BIOS. ROM BIOS number 38 version 1.15. That's what we've seen written on the BIOS chip earlier. 640k of base, 15,360k extended. That's the 16 meg altogether. Keyboard error. No battery for CMOS or real-time clock. Well, we sort of expected that battery error, didn't we? Because that Dallas real-time clock, it's probably dead. But let's hook up a keyboard. I think the keyboard is this first one here. So it counts out the memory again, tells us the size is not correct. No keyboard error this time. Still getting the CMOS error, but that's expected. Let's go into the BIOS. So we can set the date and the time. Don't need a password. Is there any boot log? Nope. Although I suppose there maybe wouldn't be since the battery's died. Admin. And look at that there. Hard disk 0, hard disk 1, none or non-IDE-AT. Does that sort of confirm that that port there, which I thought might be IDE, does that confirm that that is indeed what that is? But with no drives attached yet, so we'll just leave that as it is. Don't even have a floppy drive attached at the minute, but we will attach that one in a second. That came with the machine. So I'll just leave that as it is. More security options again. No system password. You can set the minimum length for a password, but I don't really need a password, I don't care. Boot medium. Non-floppy disk, hard disk network. What's compatible mean? Not sure. We're going to try and boot to a floppy. And there is some info. So again, system BIOS version 1.15. There's a date, 2nd of June, 95. Loader version 1.14, cache 256k. That's what we thought we seen on that CPU card. Speaking of CPUs, there we are. 46DX2 overdrive. Doesn't look like an overdrive chip, but CPU speed 66 megahertz. So I would guess that what we have in there is an Intel 46DX2 66. There's our memory again, as we've seen when I posted. coprocessor installed. The 46DX obviously has the coprocessor on die, and no pointing device installed. I haven't plugged in a mouse yet. So yeah, not a lot to see in this BIOS. It's looking for the floppy drive there. I haven't attached it yet. I'll do that in a second. But it's also suggesting there, insert configuration utility disk in drive A. Press F1 to continue, or insert for setup mode. So insert, yeah, that just takes us back to that. But I wonder with that utility disk, is there more options to configure? Let's just hook up the floppy drive, because I want to see if we can get this thing even just to boot the DOS. Okay, its original floppy drive is hooked up here, ready to go. I've got the cover off the top of it just because I give the heads a bit of a clean. But let's see if it works. This disk here has free DOS on it. So we'll try that, see if we can boot the free DOS. System halted. I didn't expect it to do that. Unable to boot from Media 1 floppy disk. Well, I haven't put that in yet. Unable to boot from Media 2 hard disk. Well, I haven't connected one of those yet. Boot Media 3 not specified. So it seems if our old server here can't boot, it just gives up. Well, we'll put that disk in and Control Alt Delete. Let's see if it boots free DOS. Well, it certainly started to. And then it sort of gave up. And the system won't even reset. Pressing Control Alt Delete does nothing. It's crashed. Yep. Keyboard lights are no longer working. Why has it crashed? Let's give it another go. This time it doesn't even try to start booting the disk. MS-DOS setup disk. Let's see if I can boot to this. Maybe there's some weird incompatibility with FreeDOS. No, again, it has just given up straight away. Although it didn't crash, I was able to reset it, Control Alt Delete. Starting MS-DOS. And it looks like it has crashed this time. It has indeed, although this time the number lock key is stuck on and the keyboard's not responding. Definitely something unhappy here. So I had a quick chat with John from the Retro Bytes YouTube channel over on my Discord. Yes, I've got my own Discord now. Feel free to drop in and say hello, link is in the description. I wondered if perhaps this machine had some just general incompatibility with DOS. But no, John used to have one of these, or something very similar anyway. And it seems that that boot disk it was looking for, that configuration disk, it seems that you'll need that to configure the ESI cards and all the memory options. If you remember looking through that BIOS, there was no memory options. And the crash that we're seeing here, I'm wondering, is it a memory problem? Are the memory timings set incorrectly for that RAM stick? Now, I do have one more compatible RAM stick for this machine. Being a server, it's looking for parity RAM, and I only have the 2 sticks of it. But swapping out to this one, it does exactly the same thing. Tries to start booting MS-DOS or FreeDOS and just crashes. In fact, one time, trying to boot it off camera, it gave a divide overflow error. Another time, it even filled the screen with garbage. It just reminds me of a memory problem. I was able to find the manual for the motherboard though, and for that I have to say thanks to Mike J from RMC's Discord. Discord really is an endless resource of useful people to bounce ideas off. But Mike was able to very quickly find me the PDF copy of the manual for this. Well, if we scroll down to page 4, you can see the CPU card here. Now if we keep going onto page 5, we do have an option on the CPU card via jumpers to disable the onboard cache. So there may be a fault in the cache RAM. Let's try and disable it. See if it boots any further. So jumpers 11, 12, 13 is open. 13 should be closed. There's 256k of cache on this, as we know. And according to that data sheet, jumper 13 and indeed 14 for 256k of cache, those two should be closed. And indeed jumper 18 as well, that one should be closed as well. Maybe fit some jumpers onto them and we'll test it again. Not even attempting to boot. And it's crashed. I can't reset it. Control-Alt-Delete does nothing. We'll just try a power cycle. If it doesn't work, we'll try taking all those jumpers off, disabling the cache. These numbers up here, by the way, I'm pretty sure these are postcodes. You see it's cycling through everything. Now when it gets to BF, I think that's it booting. But it's crashed. So let's try removing these. Let's disable the cache RAM. Just want to go into the BIOS quickly. And yeah, that's interesting. On the info screen, it's still displaying 256k of cache. I think we're going to need that other disk, that configuration disk. I don't have it. It's crashed even earlier in the boot sequence this time. It's displaying postcode A3. Let's give it a power cycle, see what it does. It crashed at the same point, A3. Let me just reinstate all those jumpers. I'm not sure what that postcode is. I had a quick look online and I can't really find anything associated with a quad tail BIOS. But if I had to guess, it could be something to do with the cache, since that's what we've been changing here. All jumpers are back to as they were. That 256k of cache should be enabled again. This time it has got further in the boot sequence, although it seems to have just crashed again. There is a lot of play in that CPU card. I mean, could it be something as stupid as that? Could be a bad connection in here. Crashed. Let me show a bit of corruption on the screen there. You know what? I think we need that configuration disk. Well, I have tried everything that I can think of and I can't get this machine to work. Even tried hooking up an IDE drive, you know, one with the DOS partition on it, but it won't boot to that. Tried plugging in the SCSI card on that one working SCSI drive just on the off chance, but no, it won't do anything with that in there either. To be honest, I think I need that configuration disk. So, does anyone have it? Has anyone got a copy of it? Could you send me a copy of it? That's the next thing I think we need to try. Hasn't done that before. The display is now out of range. Definitely something funny going on here. I think it's memory related, memory timings related, and it seems we need that configuration disk to be able to adjust all of that. So that's it for now. Unfortunately, I can't get this machine working. I do want to get it working. It is a 46DX266. Pretty cool spec, I think anyway, with the EISA slots and the VLB slots. If I do get it working, I think it would be nice to try and benchmark it against my own 46DX266. It's got that PC chips motherboard in it. So supposedly not the best, but would be interesting to see how it compares against something like this. But until I get that configuration disk, it seems there's nothing else I can really do. So thanks very much for watching. Sorry I couldn't actually get this machine to work, but at least we got to see what hardware and all was inside it. Hopefully we can try and salvage something. Hopefully someone watching has that magical disk that I need. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.